All right, my English teacher friends, Christian Kuhn coming at you, the Bob Ross of composition. And instead of a writing workshop, I actually have a project that I want to share with teachers and students that was highly successful for me, was a big hit, and it was kind of a spark plug for re-engagement at the midpoint of the year. And it's called the Human Library Project. Some of you might be familiar with this. In Denmark, back in the year 2000, they had human beings that you could sign out of the library, and other people could take them off the shelf and just have conversations, interactions, and get to learn someone else's story. And this is one of the reasons why I became an English teacher. I've always been compelled by people's stories. And I don't think we spend enough time, at least me personally, I don't spend enough time in my English classroom talking about life stories enough, especially the kids' stories themselves. It's the formative years, and I really want my students to, pull off their own book from their own shelf and read it and write it and make meaning of it. So it's called the Human Library Project, and during this presentation, I'll give you an overview of the assignment, and then I Bob Rossed a few exemplars, like always, so that you can get a full scope of the project. Probably the easiest thing to do for context and background is to hop into YouTube, and in the browser, just type in Human Library Project. So watch the origin video. I'll put a link in the descriptors, but you can readily see it's the first video that pops up in YouTube, and it's from the Denmark Public Library. And then there are about four or five other videos on there that give kind of a cursory overview of the Human Library Project and how to adapt it for classroom purposes. So I show my students those videos and we just talk around them. And while we're on the subject of YouTube, hit that subscribe button and hit the like button on this one. So here's the overview and guidelines for the project that I used for my students. So it says choose one person, and then in parentheses book, from the shelf of life, preferably someone with whom you are not at all familiar with. So I want my kids to go find somebody and interview them. So you're going to interview this person for at least 30 minutes, take notes, possibly record it, and then capture this person's story in a book form. And then you can choose from the tangible object project list, which I'll talk about in just a second, or go rogue and use your imagination. So in the descriptors below of the YouTube video, I have a packet. It's 100 alternatives to the traditional research paper. And it has some really cool project ideas. And in terms of making a book or capturing the life of the person that's interviewed, I'm going to have my students go willy-nilly on that and, free range, carte blanche, get imaginative, get creative, and add some sparkle to whatever tangible object they want to present for their book. And then they're going to present the book to class in a 5-minute presentation. I want my students speaking a little bit more. A lot of my classes are very reticent, especially my on-level classes. They just don't talk enough. So to get them out of their shells a little bit. So that's the overview and guideline. No worries, I will model it for you, because I'm sure you're saying, so what do you want me to do with this, Christian, especially my students? So what's this going to look like? How's this take shape? And as always, even with projects, I Bob Ross my instructions. So I get to the easel, I get to the canvas, and I paint a few exemplars with and for my students. So I did this project twice. And in doing so, I actually worked out a couple of kinks, and I can now anticipate the questions that are going to be hurled my way from students and even teachers in YouTube land. So here's what I did, all right, just to give you a sense. I grew up in Norwich, New York, and there was a childhood figure that I was fascinated with. His name's Oneana's Waving Man. And any of you that, passed through Oneana in the 80s and into the mid 90s probably saw George Hemway Washington on the side of the road. He had this green pickup truck, and he chewed tobacco, and he would like spit tobacco all over the side of his truck, and he had a dog in the back. And what he would do was he would sit at the highway there. I think it's Highway 88 as it heads out towards Albany, and he would blow kisses and wave at all the passerbys. And I was like 5 years old, 6 years old. And I said to my parents as we were driving to the Hudson area to go visit my aunt and uncle and cousins, I said, I want to be that man when I grow up. And my parents were like, "You Christian, you can't be the Oneana waving man. That's not even a job." But I was really fascinated by him and wondered what would possess an individual to come to the side of the road every day to blow kisses and wave to passerbys. And I thought there was something really spiritual about it, even as a little kid. And we sat at the Neptune Diner one day having lunch right across the street from where George was standing. And I begged my parents to go bring him a gift. I wanted to bring his dog a bone. So there was a Great American supermarket down the road, and I got a bone and I brought it to George and his dog. And we didn't really have a conversation. I was too young to really facilitate that. But all these years later, we're talking like 40 years later, I wanted to know more about George Hemway Washington because he's sort of an icon of the Oneana, New York area. So I went to the Neptune Diner last weekend, and I went up to people in the booth sitting there, the older crowd, and I said, "Hey, do you remember Oneana's waving man? Do you remember George Hemway Washington?" And I interviewed 6 different people that remembered him. And what I have done is captured those interviews in a poem. So I'm a poet. I've published a lot of poetry. And so I captured my book of George Hemway Washington in poetry form. So, yet again, for kids that want to sort of rack their brains for project ideas, the tangible object project list is in the descriptors below. Have them look at that and sort of talk them through. So that is that for the tangible object project. So let me get into my poem, and I'll debrief what I did with it. So it's entitled Oneana's Waving Man, and that's an actual photograph of George Hemway Washington. So you get a sense of what he looks like. So here's the poem. I'll just give it a read, and then I'll debrief it with you guys. I'm going to slow down tonight, George. Meet your eyes, place my hand in your wave, and just sit here for a while in your green truck and watch the folks pull into the Neptune Diner and watch the lovers move beneath the trees up ahead at Nihawa Pond. There's a knowing in your smile, a beautiful contradiction in your plastered chaw spittle mural that decorates your driver's side door. Look at them all, George. Look at how your hand brushes aside despair. Look at how your kiss undermines sorrow. That tobacco strewn artwork, I get its message. There's a scum filled bottom in each of us. But from our muck, you raise us up as far as creation goes. All of us are more alive when we're on the verge of a kiss and a wave. We forget about the potholes and the monotony of this endless journey on the other side of now. I'd like to go to the Great American with you, ask the butcher for a chicken head so that we can sit back at your place and enjoy the rapture of a dog so wrought in a present moment. I'd like to pay for it this time, reach deep into my pocket and pull out the loose change and burdock we collected earlier alongside the road. I'd like to go back to your place and listen to the late night prank callers. We'll ask all the pretty girls what color hair they have, and we'll tell them how we'd spend every last dollar we have just for a single kiss. Maybe they'll ask why you're like this, why you come to the side of the road each day, why you blow kisses, why you wave, why you left your dead dog so long in the back of your pickup. And maybe they'll come to understand in all of that drunkenness the language of a kiss blown, the language of a smile, the language of a wave, right? So that's just one example of how to do the human library project. I took one character off the shelves, and the people that the kids interview, probably they'll go with like living characters, like aunts and uncles and grandparents, or neighbors down the street, or teachers in the school, bosses at work, a community member at church. So that's what I want them to do. Ideally, somebody that they want to get to know a little better, somebody that's piqued their curiosity, someone who has like, some eccentricities or idiosyncrasies, somebody that they just want to get to know on a deeper level. So I always model a few times just to really demystify things and answer all of the kids' questions before they launch into a project or an essay. So let's do that again. So, as I alluded to earlier, I grew up in Norwich, New York, which had a slew of characters growing up. I mean, we were a hotbed for odd characters, and I actually wrote a book called The Townsfolk, which you can read the reviews on Amazon, and even buy a copy if you'd like. I wrote a book about all the interesting characters that I grew up with in Norwich, New York. And one such person was the Chicken Man. His real name was Shorty Fletcher. And I had a very interesting occurrence with him as a child that was unpleasant. And I was really young, and I wouldn't call it a traumatizing experience, but it was like a startling experience with him. So I went to Norwich, went to the hometown just the other weekend to visit, and I went to the Bluebird Diner. And I asked people in booths, older couples, my age and older, hey, do you remember the Chicken Man? Do you remember Shorty Fletcher? And I interviewed 5 people that distinctly remember Shorty. And you're looking at a picture of him now, and that's the house that he lived in, and he had like hundreds and hundreds of chickens just roaming around. And when I was a little kid, there was a Radio Shack across the street from Shorty, and I used to ride my bike during the summer down to Radio Shack and rent VHS tapes. And I was super into Bruce Lee films. And I would like get a Bruce Lee film every 3 days. And I remember one day he was outside, Shorty was, the Chicken Man. And I took all the air out of my bike tire just because I wanted to talk to him. I was like endlessly curious about him. And I asked him for a pump to blow up my tire. And the poem is a compilation of my experience with Shorty, but also all the information I got from the people at the Bluebird Diner. So here is my poem entitled Chicken Man. I took all the air out of my bike tire just so that I could talk to him. Sat there on the side of the road, watched 2 chickens peck the earth, waited for him to come outside. I heard it said somewhere that all 4 babies died at birth, and he placed them in the Shenango River. He and his wife lived alone after that, built a tar paper shack, and cut themselves off from everyone and everything. There was something slow there, something simple in the weight of August. The rain collected in the old oil drum. The sun-covered corn was tall. The wood pallets were stacked. High in the rusted Ford missing its tailgate, the roof sagged from too many layers of county dump scrap. Through the frayed door screen, I could see a wood stove by the base of the stairs, and I imagined him sitting there in the soft chair of a lifetime, his unbuttoned pants hoisted over a round belly. When he finally came outside, he cuffed his dog's ears for coming too close, scratched a foot in the dirt for good measure, lifted his chin to ask what I wanted. No, he did not have a pump, but he had a rope out back, one that just might fit me. I love that ending because that was kind of the startling moment. He threatened to hang me from a tree for being on his property, and so I had to push my deflated bike tire all the way home with my Bruce Lee VHS tape in my backpack. So that's kind of how you do the Human Library Project. Just 2 exemplars of how to do it. And I think that gives kids a good enough sense of how to proceed through it. So if you have any questions or comments or want any further clarification or resources for this, feel free to drop me an email at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. Also know I'm a lead teacher for the National Writing Project, and I present quite often with NCTE. And I have a website. It's got some free resources on there and a calendar with all my events. And just to be mindful, most are free. So, like for example, tonight I'm presenting my alternative grading methods with perfection learning, and I present with them quite often. So most are free, some are for a nominal fee, but you can see what we're offering as far as professional development on my webpage, www.teachinghowtowrite.com. And then students and teachers, you can pass this on to your students as well. I run a program called Write at Ivy Write, and I teach students how to do their personal statements for college. I do a lot of tutoring with AP Lang, AP Lit. Been teaching those courses for over 20 years. And then kids that just want to shore up the fundamentals of composition, I do group and one-on-one tutoring. So spread the word, and if you want more information on that, again, just drop me a line. All right, so that's one such project in Mr. Kuhn's classroom. Happy teaching, happy writing, and we'll see you in the next video.